What's going on, everyone? We're back. This time, we're building this. This is a large low, about 33-gallon Exo Terra, and we are doing a full tropical setup with kind of a forest creek, forest seep, you could call it, running through, kind of S-ing through the center here. And this full build is for a crocodile skink. Red-eyed, wide-eyed, either one. This is going to be species specific for that lizard. That skink species is typically near and around flowing water sources, streams, rivers, things like that. And it is living in the thick leaf litter that is around in those tropical forests. So you want a really dense, very heavily covered area. All of this is going to grow in. These are young plants. I don't want to plant them too dense because there's a lot of them in here, but that's what we're going to be diving into. If you guys want to see this build, make sure to watch the rest of the video and I'll take you through step by step how I did it. All right, so we've got the blank canvas here. So now I'm going to just start with a simple cork background that I did for this one. Again, I always usually do a painter's line, painter's tape line, kind of just for me to reference how low I want to go with my background. This one having the water in the bottom, the base of it, I don't want the cork going all the way down to that. It doesn't really matter. It totally could, but I want to leave those gaps for my Matala, which is going to be my false bottom, which is what's keeping the land sections of all of this up, elevated. So I want the cork up out of that. Plus there's going to be soil up against the walls, and that's going to be building up. And so it's just more space for the soil. So it's not just right into the cork itself. And then again, yeah, with this one, I'm going to, as you see, leave the sides open. My preference when it comes to more of these tropical, subtropical, especially paludariums, I like to leave the sides open because I want those viewing windows. Whereas typically more arid enclosures, I'll usually cover the sides up. So yeah, let's go ahead and get going with this one. So I've got some past cork, other projects, some medium, small pieces. And I've got a few brand new sheets still that I want to use. So I quite like the looks of this one. I like the textures. Pretty thick. It's got some mosses all over, kind of growing on it already. Piece 2, again, those nice factory edges. I like to just put those in the corners already. Makes it easy for me. They fit perfect right up into your corners. Gives you nice edges. And I'm going to go ahead and tip this tank back just so I can see better. Perfect. So that piece fits perfectly up into this corner of this. Leaves a little gap, but that's okay. I'll fill that in with small pieces. But it goes right down to basically where I want it on the bottom as well. I might even break some of that off so it's not as low as it is. So tube gone. Gotta grab another tube. This is 97.4% done. So not much left. Just a couple small parts that I want to fill. And honestly, as far as that tape line, like I said, it's a general reference. Most of these pieces aren't even down to my painter's tape line. But that variance in where they are will kind of be a natural place to where I'm like, okay, if the soil doesn't already just cover that entire gap, which I think it's going to be at least that high, so that shouldn't even be a problem, but it just means, okay, there's going to be more soil here, and you know, you can go down here and there's going to be more here. Wherever those raises and gaps are, if your soil's not already covering that, meaning up to these lines, then I'm going to just put the soil up to them. But I think it's going to cover them, should be good. Just got a couple more pieces I want to fill in, probably some small ones. Well, let's grab another tube. That didn't work. Just to really properly fill all these tiny little gaps that sometimes you can do this or don't, just leave the gaps open. It's not a big deal. Especially if you're going to paint the background, then you really don't need to do all this, but I'm just trying to be extra thorough with this one. Fill these tiny spots in. Maybe a few more small ones I want to try to tackle here and call it a background done. And these feeding tongs can be incredibly useful for this exact purpose, as well as so many other things. If you don't already have a pair, get you some. Here's you guys' close up of the background I just did in this large low. That bottom is going to have, you know, the soil and stuff up to that. So that's all good. Filled in most of the little gaps and cracks with small pieces. Still some, but not bad. And I'm not decided if I'm going to paint this one yet or not, but this is how it's looking so far. All right, so now I'm going to be doing some of the Matala work, this false bottom work, because the cork can continue to cure. I don't have to wait for that for the bottom. I just want to start kind of laying out where I want my Matala and the false bottom. I have an idea already of what I want, but now I just got to actually put this stuff in there and then really visualize exactly where I want my land and what I'm doing with this build. So this is what a full sheet looks like, at least for the ones that I buy. This is the size the full sheets come in of this stuff. This is the, I think, 1.5 inch thickness Matala. And I don't remember the exact dimensions of this, but it's not too bad. I think I got 3 sheets this dimension for like $30. So I mean, it may a bit pricey, but you know, that's should be more than enough for one build. So really it's not too bad if you're looking to build something using this. And it's such a good, like, it doesn't crush, it holds its shape. You could cut it with a razor knife super easy. So I really like this stuff. I've already got a few small pieces and I'm going to try to just utilize these as they are and maybe modify them if I need to slightly, but we'll see. I've got a general idea, you know, of how I want this to be. I'm going to have a creek flowing through this with a small little pool here in this front left corner. So I'm going to have that just kind of open. It's going to be a small pool, basically like a water bowl, but then I'm going to have an open bottom creek bed kind of S-ing through the tank or winding through to just ending kind of in the center over here. And the rest will all just be land around that, which is perfect for a crocodile skink, I mean, they need that high humidity. They want the moist soil, and having this will do that perfectly. Like having a full creek open through it. Again, you know, the entire bottom base layer of this is going to be water. That's going to help keep all the soil moist, and all of that leaf litter and duff layer very moist and humid. And so that should be really great. And I'm going to have lush plant growth through this, plenty of cork tubes, branches, things to climb and hide through, as they're a very secretive species and they spend most of their time in the forest, you know, on the forest floor, traveling through duff layers of leaf litter and detritus and this, you know, wood and all these things. So that's what we're going to try to do. Excuse me as I block the view. So when you put Matala in, just kind of a general thing, whenever you use a sheet, if it's got a slight flex to it or warp to it, you always want to put the warp up, not down, so that your edges are like this. You always want the warp side up so that you can then add on top of this, and it's going to compress it and flatten it down. So this whole layer I'm just going to throw in here because this sheet actually comes perfectly, like 18 by I think 24. And so I'm just going to put this in here. You can press it down and then boom, you've got an entire layer. Now, if you wanted 2 of these stacked on top of each other, then you'd be right at basically the depth of this opening, which I think is about 2 inches. And so you'd be good for that. I'm not even going to have the water in here the full depth of this. So like, you know, it said 1.5 inch thickness Matala. I'm not going to have 1.5 inches of water. I'm maybe going to have 1/2 inch of water, or maybe 3/4 inch of water. So it's not even going to cover all this. So most of my base is just going to be one piece of this. And then I'll fill in some portions maybe where I'll throw in an extra piece or do this or whatever in the areas I want to really raise it and to give it a drier area that's, you know, that much more elevated out of the water level. And then you'll have your separation barrier, whether that's screen material like the screen mesh material that I usually use, or your, you know, your garden weed mats, which are really the same thing as a lot of the reptiles sold ones. It doesn't matter, whichever one. Maybe a combination of those 2 things would work good. I may even do that kind of like screen layer first, but then put that mat down in certain places where it's going to be heavy soil and I don't really want the soil leaching through, but there's still that screen below that. So yeah, so once you really figure out where you want your layout, and I'm putting this piece over here because again, like I already had this piece and it's cut like that from one of my previous builds that I've used before. I'm going to put this right in this corner here, and that is just going to be where it is. I'm going to utilize that and then run the creek kind of following that, and then I'm going to come off of that and cut into this one where I want that creek to be flowing to this front corner where I'm going to have a little pool. And then I'll just basically freestyle my cut. If you want, you could put out a stencil, you know, cardboard or big poster board paper or whatever works for you to get a better visual, and do some drawing. You can draw where you want it, take however many attempts. I've visualized it enough and I know where I want things to be with this that I'm just ready to cut it. And this curvature is not exactly where it's going to be because the creek is going to be built down into the gap I make. So it's going to be smaller than the gap I'm making through this Matala. So if you want your actual creek to be this wide, you're going to need to cut the Matala on each side, you know, probably double that, if not a little more, because then you're going to build down to that creek bed, right? Which is then going to be about that wide. If that makes sense. So you want to cut back further than the width you actually desire. Just following along. Make your creek flow where you want. And make your cut. I push this down as I go because it kind of helps keep my line where I want it. And then I'll go to the opposite side of that and follow my original cut so I know where I'm going. Okay, so most of that's out. I'm probably going to have to widen that, but I got my two main cuts. And then where I want the pool to be, I'm going to cut around. Nice. So it's going to be just a really small pool up here in the front corner. And then the creek's just kind of winding through here. So this piece is already here. My creek's going to end here. I'm going to follow this curvature. And then from here, I'm matching that and cutting in. So now you can see the indent where I actually cut it. And so I followed this piece and then just kind of made my cut where I wanted down to this corner. And then I cut this corner. And then I went onto the back side and cut this back side just following my front cut, which you can't see that great, but you can see the separation there. And I'll flip this over, take it out, flip it over, and then cut the bottom. Okay, so I got that pretty much cut, the rough cut of it. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to try to match those cuts on the bottom side, get those pieces out, and then I can at least have a really good visual of where things are at. And then I can make that creek cut wider if I need to along there to open it up more. Got that out, and you can see, maybe you can't see, but where my cuts are and how well this stuff separates. So it's very easy to cut. This stuff cuts so nicely. It's really, really nice to work with. And then you can either just kind of open it like I am and cut deeper into that so you know exactly where you're cutting, or you can go to the bottom and try to match where your cut was. It might be a little off. It can be a little harder. I might just try to cut through. Well, I don't know. If you got a longer knife too, I mean, that'd be really ideal because then you have a blade that can reach all the way through. This is what I've got. So this is what I'm working with. Yeah, that followed that pretty perfectly. Because it's falling into the groove of where your top cut was. So that my knife is going in enough that it's matching the groove of my first cut from the top. So that kind of helps too to follow. Maybe there's other ways, but that's what worked for me just now. So now I don't want to forget which side went where. So most of the way through, oh, there we go. You'll get these random little stringies. These can all just pull off or cut off with this stuff. They snap right off. Really easy. Okay, and that went here and matched up to that. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to cut this wider back a bit more, but that gave me my general shape. And then I'm gonna have to match this side and fill this corner in with some excess. So I think I get away with just using that one sheet and well, that's gonna go perfect there. You also don't have to have this 100% filled in. Like I can take some of these and just cut squares or whatever and stick them in here so they're filled. You can silicone this to the bottom so it doesn't move at all. That's not a bad idea. But then if you want to wrap it with your screen material or your mesh, your fiber mesh, whatever, you're going to have to do that kind of simultaneously. So that's what I've got going on now. Maybe better for you guys to visualize, but this is going to be a little pool, very small little pool. And then it's going to flow through here, through this, and then match this side. I'm going to fill that in with Matala. This will just be the end. So it'll kind of, be around here and come up. And again, I'll build up some of this higher, like I said, with like another piece like this, and probably have it just like that. And that'll build that up higher. I can even use these and cut little chunks out of it and stick where I want to have it higher. You don't have to have full sections of it. And then I'll cut chunks out of this to fill in this gap here. So what I'm going to try to do now is just kind of shave these back and match my cut to get that wider cut that I was telling you about, so that the creek itself is the right width that I have an idea of. So I'm just going to go like half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch further back. Okay. The stuff is also like, as you see me working with it, you can kind of just, you don't even have to cut all the way through, and you can tear it and tear it apart, and it doesn't weaken it. Like, it's still fine how it is like that. Cool. So I'm digging that. So you can see how much more opened up that is now. Compared to what it originally was. This fits perfectly in there. Cool. I like that. So the little pool is going to flow through, come back this way, and it's kind of broken up a little bit. But I kind of like that. So this piece you saw is what I just had. I just cut that, kind of contouring that. And this is off of one of my little trim pieces and just stuck it right in that gap. So that'll fit perfectly. So just to give you guys an idea of some of the river stone that I've got, things like this are what's going to be building up on the edges. And this is all just natural river stone that I've collected over the years. Went rock hounding and found all these pieces myself, and then fully boiled them and sanitized them. I've just had them for a long time. But then these pieces will be what sit along your edges, like so, gravel, sand, whatever in the bottom, and then these kind of build up your edges along the bank line. And then out of that is going to be all soil built up to however deep you want. You can have some real deep portions in the back and on your bigger corners. And then, in the front, you can only go so high because you got your opening here, but that'll probably go all the way up to the top, but across the whole top. But then you've got this little section that it can go down to and get into the water if it wants, whatever. And it'll be fully planted and so on. So yeah, we'll kind of keep grinding away, figuring these out, get the screen in, and then can start filling in. Okay, so this is where I've come to now. This is my second layer up of the Matala. Just got this chunk there, chunk here, little piece in the corner, and then some extra strips coming out. So all of that is going to have at least 3 solid inches raised up above the water level. Well, the water is going to be half an inch, so mine is half an inch. But you'll have that gradual step up onto those. And then this lower stuff in the front, because you can only have this up so high to the tank. So that's the general shape I'm going to go with. That's how it's going to look. You'll be able to see, into that corner, just a small pool. The rest is Matala, but this is going to have the screen material over it. And then the soil up in the background. It's all going to be covered. And this is the sheet, the screen material that I use. Just get these big rolls of it for really cheap. This was like $8. And that's what I'll put around it. And then you can also use the filter fabric if that's what you like, which is this stuff here. Got some small stuff bound up. But yeah, I've used both. I think I have a video in the past talking about them. They both got their ups and downs, but I might even use a mixture of both in here. So this whole next process of covering all of this with screen and wrapping it can be quite a pain, especially trying to follow the contours I've taken a couple of the second level pieces out of this. I just don't think they're that necessary, and they're just going to kind of fulfill extra room that's not needed. So this is the next process is going to be covering them with the separation barrier. I'm going to use a combination of both the mesh screen and the filter fabric or your weed barrier, whatever you want to use. I'm going to use both of those. I'm kind of going to just use a general layer of the filter fabric on the big, large surfaces to help with keeping things from bleeding through. But then I'm going to use the screen mesh that's going to fully wrap around the front and back edges to fully wrap all the Matala. The reason I'm doing that is basically to use up scraps. Like you saw me putting all this Matala pieces in here, how I used a bunch of different separate little pieces rather than just like two big full cutouts from the sheets. That's because from all my past projects, I just have a ton of scrap built up of Matala and screen and filter fabric. And that scrap pieces just keep building up and building up. And so I'm trying to utilize those pieces on a build, which is what I'm doing now. So that's why it's a bit more tedious. It's a little more work because I've got all these different little separated pieces. And like I think I mentioned, yeah, you could you could do like silicone and silicone all these separate metallic pieces together to make it kind of one solid block. But I'm impatient, and then you'd have to wait for all those to cure, and I don't want to do that. I just want to start wrapping it with the separation barrier and then move forward with the build. So I'm going to try to wrap them, leaving them all loose, but the metallic kind of holds on to itself when you push pieces together. So hopefully it's not too terribly tedious, but it will be a bit of an effort. Let's get to wrapping. You guys can see my layout here. I did have a couple more second level pieces. Those are gone. I'm just going to leave this corner with the second level where there's plenty of space to work around. As far as soil and stuff, I'll just build it higher. There's going to be enough of a gap anyways off the water, as I'm only going to have maybe a half an inch of water, and this is 1.5 inches thick Matala, so should be at least an inch over the water level. So yeah, and then I've got all these scrap pieces I'm talking about of my filter fabric. I want to put these over the big main chunks. Like this is what I'm talking about. So like the main surface area of the Matala, I'm going to put the filter fabric on to cover, and that's going to help keep any of my soil from seeping in. I'll then put, for an example, a piece of screen on top, but a full piece. This is just a little scrap to show, but I'll put this on top over that fully wraps. I'm just going to use the filter fabric to cover the majority versus only putting screen, which I have a full roll and I could just wrap everything and it'd be real easy, but I'm doing it the hard way and trying to use all my little pieces again. But this also, like I've discussed in previous videos, it will leach a little bit more soil particulate through it than your filter fabric will. There's pros and cons, I think, to each type. It's up to you. Use whichever one you want. They both work great. I've used them both in builds. My paludarium right now currently has just screen and it's doing a great job. But with this one, I kind of want to try a combination of the two. All right, so I got all of the fabric filter in place where I want on the majority of the surface areas. So the next thing I'm going to do is cover it with my screen mesh. This is going to go wrapped fully around and under the front side. So this will wrap around the front the same as the fabric is and underneath, and then back up inside it will wrap around the full bank edge of the creek. And I'm going to do two separate sections. I'm going to do the front and then I'm going to do the back. All right, so I've got my screen mesh piece cut, plenty enough to cover both sides. I'm actually going to take this whole chunk out, or attempt to, and put it inside of this basically, and then put it back in rather than trying finagle the screen around the front and over the top of this. And I don't know. I just think that's going to be a big pain. Now I will kind of adjust, make sure the filter is where it needs to be. It's not. Kind of adjust all that. Towel is where I want. This is moving. So now I've got the first half covered. It's a little rough, it looks pretty loose, but that's just because there's no rock or anything to hold it down tight. But this will all just compress once the hardscape and soil is on top of it. So with that long piece, I had it tucked under this front edge, just underneath it a little bit. And then the excess that was laying out over the top, you're gonna have to make some like relief cuts. Like you can see one of the cuts that I had to cut into here. And you'll have to make a few of those along these like big changes, like wherever you have the angles or the big dips, you're gonna have to make relief cuts into the screen to actually get it to fold nicely under. I wanna get the back section done. So I'm just gonna do basically the same thing, use my roll. I'm gonna get enough excess to wrap behind the back and underneath a little bit, like an inch or two, whatever you want, just enough to really hold it there. And then enough excess to come forward to fully cover all these things tightly. And then I'll have to cut off, make some relief cuts around these bends, cut off any excess that's super long, and then fold underneath the front edge. So that's pretty much the rough outline of how all that's going to be covered. The only way this is going to get any better is now when I start actually setting in hardscape. But that's pretty much the gist of that, covering those layers. And then that's going to be my false bottom, which has the separation barriers there. And then, the soil and things will go on top of that. Okay, so now I got my rocks here that I'm going to use kind of as my medium size, I would call these, rock for my main edge barrier. I've got bigger sizes than this also, some various bigger sizes. And then I have a bunch of like small to like pebble size or like tiny gravel, more like aquarium gravel size. All of my rock, I collect myself. I rock hound all this stuff. It is legal. I would check your local, your state and local, laws and regulations on rock hounding and where you can do it and how much you can get. It's usually a per year poundage or something, or a per trip poundage. And then I boil this stuff. For me, it's like give it a good solid rinse, boil it, rinse it, good to go. Totally sanitized or sterilized and then ready to go, instead of paying a bunch of money for rock. And it's also just really beautiful natural river stone, and you get to pick it all yourself and pick the prettiest pieces and what you think looks best, and you get some really nice charactered awesome rock. But yeah, I'll start setting these in along the edges and where I think they should go, and then I'll kind of build into the smaller stuff more in the center of it and the bigger stuff more on the outside edges of it. There's really no rhyme or reason. This nice big one. Some cool rocks. So anything to just get these put in where you want to put them and build them up. And as you can see, this probably helps give a better view as to how the stone is going to take up a lot of the space. That I was saying, this creek is going to be quite a small little stream. These will be the main bank that I'm building up. and then I'm going to build up over from these. But then, you know, if I put these on both sides, you can imagine how small this is actually going to be, the opening of that. So if I have a bunch more over here built up, it's going to be quite a little stream. But that's the whole point. I didn't want this to be a big, huge chunk. Crocodile skinks aren't, you know, going to be really swimming so much, but they are almost always found in their natural habitat near rivers and stream systems or water's edges. And so that's kind of what I'm replicating here, is giving it this water's edge, but it will also just help keep the entire overall tank's humidity up, having a full watered bottom with this false bottom above it. And that's perfect for them, considering they need 80 to 90% humidity, just constant. So this will be a great way to do that. So the smaller stuff is what's going to be my base layer, where I'm going to fill in and mix, and that's going to run through the whole creek. And then off of the smaller stuff, which will help raise my bottom a little, I will put in these more medium stones on top of the little stuff that's inside here. So I just want a base layer. I don't want to get too much of it. Pick out some of these bigger clumps. Okay, something kind of like that. And then I'll build in with the bigger ones now up more on the banks. And kind of build up that barrier edge, larger, medium-sized chunks. That will now be over the Matala high enough to hold the soil where I want it. It's not a perfect barrier. There's going to be some seepage and spillage, but that's all part of it. It's fine. It's going to be an ecosystem. It's not a big deal. But this is just kind of my main idea, and so this is what I'm doing. These nice different stones in here. This is a pretty cool rock, really pretty. This will help keep the Matala kind of pushed into place as well. All right, so we got this one now pretty built up. I've added a bunch in. I'll give you guys a closer view here, but most of the creek bank has been built up and has been added in. So now you can kind of see the vision come into life a little more. These are some excess rocks. Not everything is in place, but you know, the main small creek bed that's going to be running through, like I said, is going to be quite small. But I planned on building most of my edge up with these bigger medium rocks. These are going to be kind of that edge that helps hold the soil back and keeps the soil separated. I'm just keeping some excess rock here so I can play around and still move things as I'm building. But I'm going to add in some soil and start adding in some hardscape, some branches and things like that. For the soil, I'm using kind of my own blend of ABG mix, you know, like it's a pretty typical, like the Atlantic Botanical Garden. That's kind of, I don't know, a gold standard that people use in terrariums, like as far as a good, light, well-draining soil, but holds moisture decently as well for humidity. My soil that I've had in here and soil mixtures I've talked about in past builds are kind of similar to that, but you know, my own twist on them. This one is a little bit more kind of on par with what a standard ABG is, only I don't use peat. I do, you know, it's got the cocoa coir, I have sphagnum, I have charcoal, but then instead of like peat moss, which is what their main nutrient ingredient is. Oh, I also have orchid bark, right? That's a main one. But instead of the peat moss, I do a mix of like leaf litter and worm castings for my nutrient piece. And then I also add in a bit of like Reptisoil and some more, maybe a tiny bit of pumice or leca or something in there for, a light drainage layer type ingredient. First scoop of soil going in. It's going to be a bit of a mess. There's going to be some spillage into the creek area. Like, this isn't a perfect boundary, is what it is. It'll work itself out. Once water's in here, the soil will settle down to the bottom. I can also, then drain it out, siphon it, whatever. But just kind of trying to get this base layer. Now, that second layer of Matala also, I probably already said it, but it's not to raise my soil. Like, if I want higher soil, I'm just going to put more soil in and make it deeper, which is actually just more beneficial for the plants anyways. But I'm doing that to give a section of tank that's that much further elevated from the water level. So then it's going to be that much drier. So this higher section will be drier than the lower portions that are only at, this far off the top of the water. They're going to be this far off the top of the water. So this is how it's looking now. You can see the edge here. There's some spots where I want to add some rock to help hold the soil back. The front can only go so deep. I'm going to add more, but you can only go up to your door line really, and I don't want to block my venting in the front either. So I'm only going to go up to these markers, which is where technically water would be able to start flowing through. Now, I'm not going to have water that high, but I do want to have plenty of ventilation. And then the back, I'm going to build up a lot more, but I'm using this now to see like, okay, where do I need to add rock to help hold the soil back so it's not just going to always fall in. And then obviously when there's a lizard in here and they're running around and going buck wild, they're going to do what they want. So they're going to mess it up more too. I'm going to put branches and things in. It's going to make a mess. It's all part of the system. It'll all balance out, and I can always clean things. This is just filling in these holes, cracks, and blending in the rock. Blending in the levels so it's not just such hard lines between the small and the large rock, but more of a natural mix. And most of the soil is also just going to be filled with plants and vegetation. This is going to be a pretty heavily planted tank, which is more ideal for crocodile skinks, considering they spend the majority of their time hidden beneath the dense like leaf litter layer that's in those tropical climates on the forest floor. This butte right here, which is already covered in a lot of really awesome natural moss growth, and I was going to be putting this one like such in here. It fits perfectly against the glass there and on this front edge. That helps and goes, winds around, goes to the back. Perfect little crossing section here over the creek and touches the front of the tank again. So that's a pretty sweet piece. Definitely dig that. And then I'm going to continue to just build off of that. Now I've got some chunks of wood here that will work out of the pieces here I just laid out. I haven't tried any of these yet, just this one main kind of piece that I wanted there. And I'm going to go off the rest, or I'm going to go off of this for the rest. I've got 3 pieces of cork tubes that are going to be of size for this build. Everything else I have is way too big as far as cork, and they're not going to work in this build. And then I've got several different little very branchy and rooty looking chunks of spiderwood. And so this stuff can go all over wherever, fit it around. And for the cork, I'm not sure. I mean, I can break tubes and split them. I don't mind. I've done it plenty of times. Like you find a natural split like that and you can just crack it in half, get some half tube chunks. I may do, or just leave something whole. Definitely going to have a bridge that goes across somewhere, not just this piece, but another one of these. Even I think this piece is probably too big. I mean, crocodile skinks want hides. They need them. You need a lot of hides. And because I chose to run this stream split through the tank and it kind of S's through, there's not a ton of just full on floor space. But the majority of this will be walkable because it's not just going to be standing water. Even this creek piece is going to be very shallow, small in the center. And then I'm going to have some vegetation through here as time goes on. So immediately this build's not going to have that, but the vegetation will, this will be pretty full. This thing's going to have a couple ferns in it, probably rabbit foot fern. I'm going to have at least 2 small ones in here, if not a few of them. I'm going to do some live mosses and put through, and then maybe Photonia. Definitely going to be a couple different pothos that I have put in here. Some creeping fig in here for sure. Those should all do well. That's what's going to be in their natural habitat. Will be a lot of fern, moss, and epiphytic plants that vine and trail. So after playing around with some of these, I'm going to go with this small cork. It's big enough that that size skink could for sure get through this, no problem. And they like those tight spaces like I've discussed before. Most reptiles do. They want a tight space. I also like this piece, kind of fits right over it on this bank line nicely. And I like that. And then I can kind of start going around plants now. I did break one of the tubes. I know, heartbreaker, but that's all right. Can always get more. But broke a tube to get 2 separate kind of half log hides. And then you could snap these in half even further, you know, lengthwise to get pieces that fit somewhere, which I still may do with these. I just wanted to see if I wanted these to cross the stream, which I don't. And then I'm still figuring out where I want branches. This is a really cool little rooty, spindly little piece. That could go somewhere in here and look pretty awesome. Maybe down by the bank, going into it or something. Could be an awesome piece. Could even go somewhere like that. And I can move everything again, but this is just what I got for now. Just to show you guys more close up of what I got going now. This is it so far. So this is the little front corner. That's going to be the main pool, kind of more of the water bowl, I guess you could say. Got some of the prettier rocks in here that will be more on for show, I guess. But then the main bank line, got this kind of cool big branch with the moss on it sweeping across, crossing the creek. That's the tube I decided to use, which it could fully cross and get back here. It doesn't look like a lot of space, but there's at least, you know, 1.5 inch gap. So whatever, there's enough space. And it can for sure fit through that. Then this little rooty branch cluster kind of going into the creek. This really spindly cool piece that tucked right onto that edge. Okay, this is what we're working with now. As you can tell, I've given this thing a pretty thorough misting just to help dampen all the soil. I've got 3 different little pothos starts in here. I also added this sweet little piece of driftwood I had in my out of my stash, and it's actually created somewhat of a cave, which you can kind of see through. Sorry for all the water droplets, but there's plenty of space under there for a skink to get through, and they'll definitely make use. It's also just a really cool looking piece. So I'm going to go forward and continue with the planting. I've got an array of plants here. I have a lemon button fern, a rabbit's foot fern, Ureta and Photonia. You notice a Photonia, which I'm going to probably break up into at least a few different clusters. And then I have a Rex begonia, which is this very pretty little It's a low ground covering, dense begonia, which should do great in a lower tank like this, a large low, especially for crocodile skink, which wants that dense vegetative cover. So these should all do really well in here. These plants should also spread with the right conditions. They're all a plant that likes a moist soil, which this will have, and high humidity. So it should all do really well. Matcha's in there chilling under his spotlight right now, getting that heat, basking. Grabbed a pair of tongs just in case I need them. I don't know if I will, but I'm gonna plant the lemon button fern. This is a really pretty one, a lot of nice growth. You want to make sure when you plant a fern to keep the crown either at the surface level of the soil or above it. You don't want to bury that over or you're going to kill the fern. I'm going to put this one in the back upper corner here. Just kind of make a hole. Nothing too deep because of this fern. And I'm going to put most of the growth of it leaning forward, obviously, as that's where I've got all the space. I think that the lemon buttons and the rabbit's foot are probably two of the hardiest ones as far as terrariums compared to maidenhairs and many other ferns you can try, but they typically struggle, especially with transplants. I mean, these are likely going to as well. You may see a 2 or 3 week period of like distress from the transplant, but if they're planted properly, you have the, constantly moist soil, but that's still well draining, and it's not just going to cause root rot, which hopefully this is a soil mixture like that. There's going to be good high humidity. There's going to be constantly moist soil. Don't bury your crown. For the rabbit's foot, you don't want to bury these rhizomes. These little gold kind of fuzzy branch pieces are your rhizomes. You do not want to bury these. These are what it's going to spread from and continue to grow. If you bury these rhizomes over, you're going to kill the fern. So you have to keep these all exposed. So your soil level will only really come up to here and not over that. This one's got a really nice size root cluster. And so all of these, also I should say, like I fully bare rooted them, gently get rid of all the dirt that comes with them. If you're buying these from a nursery or something, or any garden center or plant center, you want to bare root them. You want to thoroughly wash all of, your foliage off, as well as from the top and the bottom. Inspect them carefully, looking for any, mites or whatever you might get on here, any little critters you don't want to have hitchhiking on into your tank. And then this is also going to sit for weeks, quarantine time. So this is itself is kind of a quarantine tank until the animal's introduced. And so then I will know, like, if there's anything happening. You want to get as much of the soil as you can out of there without totally ripping and shredding the roots up. The button fern the lemon button is going to do better as far as toughness. You need to be a little more careful with the rabbit's foot fern clusters. And I'd be quite careful with the little Rex begonias, and the Phytonias are okay, but still gentle. And you want to get as much of the dirt as you can out of there, especially if there's any of the little fertilizer beads. They're yellow, green, brown beads. Get those out. You don't want the poison in your tank, especially if you're trying to do a natural bioactive. Rex begonias, you see, very pretty, silvery pinkish. This one was a little rougher. It was 2 clusters of it that were kind of planted together, but it is 2 separate plants. So I'm going to put one up here in the front. Let's get some Phytonias in there. Real pretty red. I'm definitely going to break these clusters up. That's totally fine to do. You find the natural groups. So like that's a natural cluster right there. There's at least 3 here. And you just want to be gentle if you do this, don't just shred the roots apart. You kind of want to work them a bit till you can get these clusters separated, kind of naturally separating the root wads as they would. If there's a little rippage or tearage from the roots, that's okay. They should be all right. All right. We've got all the plants, all the moss. It's pretty much the final touches now. For the last thing that I'm going to do is fill the water. So the full water base is going to go in here, and I'm going to add a little submersible water pump on this far end of like the creek to just try to give it some flow. My hopes are, because this is quite well outlined by the rock, having a little submersible pump in there should kind of follow that for the most part. So I want to see how it pushes the flow through that channel. I have this little Domica submersible pump. I think it's a 90 GH, they call it. And it is adjustable, like minimum and maximum flow on it. This is the inlet, the outlet, and you have multiple attachments that you can put on this for different hose sizes when you want to run water somewhere. But I'm just going to be leaving it as how it is and sticking this straight up against the glass. Over here on the far end of the creek, this will be up on the top rather than on the bottom of the creek. I want it to be up higher, so it's pushing more of the water on the top. So basically, I'm going to just clear out rocks from that section, and then I'm going to run the cord probably just over it to the back and up the back wall. It'll kind of be hidden underneath all the fern. But next is adding water, and then we'll throw this in there and see how it does. I've got about two and a half gallons in here, almost perfectly 2.5 gallons. And that is basically filling it up to the max depth I want to go. Right now, there's about a 1/4 inch gap from the water level to the top of the Matala. So that's where your soil then starts. So you want at least that much gap between that. I don't want it to just be soil sitting straight on top of water, because then it's going to be just constantly saturated soil rather than soil that's always damp and moist because it's wicking the water from that gap. But it's still perfect enough pool here, a light, very shallow little stream. So a rough idea, if that's kind of the general idea I was trying to aim for, is to get that movement through that.